Dear colleagues, we start our session. I am glad to see all of you on this session. We have our session with three presentations, and I would like to start from first presentation. So the first presentation is social economic aspects of ICT use in educational lessons from the pandemic, prepared by Yana Dybczynska, Irina Shaikun, Lyudmila Bukharina, and Oksana Onishchenko. You're welcome. Stream is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share my presentation with you.
Yes, now is okay, so you're welcome.
Okay. So, dear colleagues, I would like to present you our research, which is dedicated to social and economic factors of ICT use in education, considering the lessons of pandemic. Actually, the pandemic and the restrictions imposed on the provision of educational services around the world were a significant incentive for the intensification of production of ICT. Before the pandemic, they were rather important, but we should note that it was like a secondary component of the educational process. But in the transition to distance learning, it has become the basis for providing the high-quality educational services. The pandemic and its impact on the educational had led to the transformation of the whole learning process, and this requires a profound research. The sharp increase in the use of the information communication technologies has confirmed two factors. The first one is the fact that there are the significant number of problems and barriers. And the second is the need to take into account the social and economic aspects of the use of information and communication technologies, especially in the countries with the transitive economy, like Ukraine. The use of the information communication technologies is particularly important in our country, and this is, let's say, this importance is stipulated by two reasons. The first one is tight deadlines that we had to introduce the information communication technologies into the education during the pandemic. And the second one is the presence of social factors in the national economies, in the educational sphere, and in the directly in the use of the technologies. Based on the above stated goal, it was important to to prove or to refute a number of hypotheses. And the first one was ICT has been playing a supporting role in educational activities, both before the pandemic and during the quarantine restrictions. The second one is the existence of the significant number of barriers and problems actually hinder the introduction of ICT in education. The third one, social aspects, are not very important for introduction and enhanced development of the technologies in educational activities. And the fourth, economic aspects are of primary importance in the context of increasing use of information and communication technologies. The problem of using information communication technologies in educational process is in the focus of scientific researchers of a significant number of scholars. At the same time, it is possible to distinguish three main trends of scientific thought. The first one is the research of barriers and problems in implementing ICT in educational sphere, including those in the countries in the emerging countries and the countries with the transitive economies. The second is the influence of ICT on educational activities and their development. And the third, features of the use of ICT in the educational sphere under the pandemic conditions. In the recent decades, the role of ICT in the provision of educational services has been constantly growing. And technologies before the pandemic played a supporting role in education and served as an additional tool for establishing communication, for example, between the participants of the educational process. And basically, this happened for two reasons. The first one is the difficulties and barriers hindering the introduction of ICT in education. And the second is the resistance that exists from the part of technology consumers and educational institutions. Regarding Ukraine, we have noted that in the period before the pandemic, ICT was basically used in three areas. And you can see it in this slide. The first one is to attract students to the extracurricular educational work that is basically in schools, to provide educational services in the sphere of inclusive education. The second, to improve the quality of services, to speed up communication, and to involve additional participants, more participants to the educational sphere. Especially it was important for those who, for some reason, are unable to obtain offline educational services. And the third one is to provide greater audience coverage and demonstrate progressive teaching methods. The pandemic and the timing of quarantine restrictions had led to the inability to provide high-quality educational services offline, which triggered the development of educational activities online. Competition and the influence of state bodies stimulated educational institutions, as well as other providers of educational services, to transfer almost all activities to a distance scheme. And ICT became the key in the provision of educational services. Namely, it became the main element of educational infrastructure, replacing or complementing a significant number of other elements, mostly replacing, I should say. It became the basis for the communication process between the participants. It became the main competitive advantage in the provision of educational services. And the key factor in the provision of inclusive education. We consider the barriers and problems of educational service providers with the introduction and use of ICT during the pandemic as following. First of all, it's institutional issues, most of which are related to copyright regulation or the use of intellectual property. Second, infrastructure issues. They are related to the readiness of the infrastructure at the state level, regional level, or even individual territorial community. The third one is training of personnel. We're talking primarily about the technical personnel, which is ready to provide the maintenance and the support and the technical support for the educational service providers. The next one is organizational issues, which are associated with a sharp shift in the educational activities to the online environment and the use of the mixed forms. Then availability and quality of equipment, and I'll talk about this later, and of course psychological issues. Key barriers and problems for educational service providers. First of all, for teachers and other service providers, key barriers and problems are considered as following. The first one is training in the use of information technologies, since a significant number of them have problem with the introduction, with the using of ICT in the educational problems and lack of time for the advanced training. The second one is the availability and quality of equipment, taking into account the problems of the providers. There is a need, there was a need to use their own equipment, which was not always suitable for such purposes. The next one is difficult of choice of products, because the producers now offer a great amount of different products that can be used, or at least they are announced as those that can be used in educational activities, and to select and test those products, considering lack of time and tight deadlines, it was quite tricky. The next one is methodological issues, which are related to the use of other teaching techniques and methods and their choice again of the suitable ones. Psychological issues, both on behalf of providers and the consumers of educational services, and students' motivation. Barriers and problems for the consumers of educational services, and the main one of them can be defined as following. First of all, it's technical support, especially for students with low incomes, as well as for students from the areas with the poorly developed infrastructure. Then training, since the significant number of the students were not familiar with all the opportunities that are provided by ICT. Again, psychological problems and creating the demand for educational services, as online learning increases the role of self-study and the role of independent work, which brings us back to the problem of motivation. Social aspects of enhancing ICT in education. In our abstract, we provide some information, some detailed information. There are some tables there. But to sum it up, we can say that, first of all, our study was held, a couple of words about the study itself. It was held in 2020. The respondents were the providers of educational services who participated with us in different national and international online conferences. It was the participants of our networking. And we asked them to fill out the questionnaires and to encourage their colleagues and their students to participate in our research. So the sample of the consumers of educational services, of students, was 1,457, and the sample of the providers was 314, I beg your pardon, 314. So we divided for the study of social aspects, we divided all students into several age groups. Under 15, from 16 to 18, 18 to 31, and 3150, and over 50. So the results, our findings were the following. We also considered their gender and place of residence and the possession of ICT equipment, sufficient or insufficient from their point of view. So the findings are the following. A sharp increase in the use of ICT by consumers of educational services, which happened under the pandemic. However, given the negligible number of offline classes which were held during this period, it is clear that a lot of consumers suspended their classes, their studies, and especially critical situation was with the students under 15 years of age and those over 31. And these are the age groups that require additional measures to enhance the use of ICT. Students, the increase in the proportion of students who do not possess sufficient equipment, especially this was mentioned by almost all groups. The only group that considered this question more or less satisfactory was the age group of 31 to 50. This is one of the reasons why some consumers did not receive the educational services during the pandemic. And the situation with the territorial and gender gap is quite interesting. Women actually have more problems with access to equipment than men, especially in rural areas. But on the other hand, women both in urban and in rural areas are more active in the use of ICT in educational sphere. Social aspects of using ICT for providers of the services. So again, 314 people divided by age, gender, and sufficient or insufficient equipment. Our findings: the age category of over 50 demonstrated really low level of ICT implementation in the professional sphere. There was also a certain gap between urban and rural areas, while gender gaps are almost absent, at least in this question. And as far as possessing appropriate equipment, providers of the age of categories 19 to 35 and over 50 also stated the insufficient supply of appropriate equipment. Economic aspects. We considered several categories, such as household incomes. By household, we understand the traditional household definition. It's a group of people that live together in the same residence. So as far as household incomes, there was no large gaps between high and middle income households and families with low income stated the significant problems actually in using ICT in their work. Women have consumed more educational services using ICT both before and during the pandemic, and for them, economic factors are really of great importance. The expenses on appropriate equipment and technologies Actually, we can state that it was a problematic with the students for the students with low level of income, and they also demonstrated the low level of expenses. And the second finding is the low level of use for students with high and medium level of expenses, but it doesn't depend actually on the period. It was before the pandemic as well as during the uh, pandemic period. Economic aspects for providers. For those who provide educational services, gender and territorial gaps, as well as the gaps in household incomes in the pandemic, have almost disappeared. There were slightly more problems with the low-income families. At the same time, those who spend heavily on equipment and ICT do not have an advantage over those who spend middle amounts. We're concerned actually that some providers, teachers, trainers, consultants do not use ICT in delivering educational services during the pandemic. That sounds a little bit weird, and that means they're lowering the level of quality of such services. Thus, the study of economic aspects of enhancing the introduction of ICT in educational activity in the context of pandemic has showed that low-income families are the most affected by these restrictions, and this requires greater participation of state and municipal authorities as well as educational institutions in this process. And these are our conclusions, going back to the hypothesis that I stated at the beginning of my talk. The study has found that with the beginning of the pandemic and the introduction of quarantine restrictions in education, the role of ICT has sharply increased. The introduction of ICT in education has faced a significant number of barriers and problems, the number and varieties of which increased with a significant increase in the use of such technologies in the context of pandemic. The introduction of ICT in educational activities requires the study of social aspects of this process, which are of key importance for the activation of the use of ICT, and the disclosure of economic aspects of enhancing of ICT use has allowed us to prove the critical importance of both social and economic aspects. That's all with my talk, and I'll be glad to answer your questions if you have.
Thank you for your presentation. And we have first question from David Esteban. This question is, what do you see as a way forward for your research? Does it have post-pandemic consequences or pose-related research challenges?
Definitely. We can't go back to the situation before the pandemic because we can never return time and we can never return the history. So the enhancement of ICT use in education will definitely continue. And we have learned how to use Zoom and Google Meet at least. So the professors, the education providers will continue to use it, and we need to learn how to overcome these difficulties that we have now. it's very difficult to say that we can overcome some, for example, financial difficulties and economic difficulties on our own. But as far as psychological issues and methodology and methodological issues, that's what the professors actually can do now. So yes, we can see a lot of different ways of developing this topic in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from audience? I have also some questions. You talked about ICT as technical equipment, software, or maybe as ICT competence of teachers and, for example, support staff, or some combination of these issues.
That's definitely the combination of those of all these issues, because we, in the process, when we use the equipment without technicians, for example, we need to know how to use the software on this equipment, and we need to use it properly. That's why it's a whole new reality for us. I mean, as education providers. So of course, it's the whole complex of different aspects.
Okay, thank you. One more question. As we see from your presentation, you talked about survey of your students, and after that you prepare statistic analysis. How many students did you include in your analysis?
Yes, unfortunately, I haven't mentioned, put it on the slide. It was 1,457 students, so 1,457 students, and 407 and 314 service providers.
Okay, thank you.
And the geography is all national, so it's different parts of Ukraine.
Thanks. Also, you demonstrated on one of your slides that for age category from 19 till 35 exists insufficient supply of appropriate equipment. In this case, what does it mean? People can't buy this equipment, or providers have not enough equipment for them?
The problem is that we didn't, uh, later in our research, we understood that we made a mistake because we didn't separate their own equipment that the providers use, and the equipment that was provided by the institutions for them. So that's why it's kind of difficult to say whether they feel the necessity, beg your pardon, to buy the equipment, or they have their own equipment and they use it, but they think that educational institutions should provide the equipment for them. Because in some educational institutions provide the whole computer classes where you can come and hold lessons from there, the whole classes from there, and the other educational institutions put all the burden of this provision on the providers. So that's unfortunately right now I can't answer this question for sure.
Okay, and last question from me. You talked about low level of using educational services from the side of students with high and medium level of expenses. So does it mean that this factor, for example, very high income, does not any impact on learning process? For example, students have no motivation, and even good and excellent equipment doesn't help in learning process.
No, maybe I formulated it differently. That wasn't the our task. Our task was to see how it changed before the pandemic and during the pandemic, and it hasn't changed at all. I mean, for high income and medium income, these categories, they didn't feel, let's say, any problems caused by the pandemic, in difference from people with low income or that have some problems, some territorial, some infrastructure problems. That's what was meant, actually.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you for your questions and interest.
Maybe some questions, one more question. If no, then thank you so much once more time, and we'll continue. And I propose to continue our next presenter, Mohammed Demirbilek.
Yes.
In their own words, teachers' experience and activities in 3D virtual worlds for foreign language teaching. You're welcome. Stream is yours.
Yeah. Let me move this one down. Can you see on the screen the presentation?
Yes, yes. All is very good demonstrate.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mohammed Demirbilek from Süleyman Demirel University in Sparta, Turkey. I and my colleague Durmuş Akın, we conducted this research together. Our research is in their own words, teachers' experiences and activities in 3D virtual worlds for foreign language teaching. Okay, hold on a second. In the before moving forward my presentation, first of all, I would like to thank you for ICT conference organizers. This is one of the best conference I have attended, because I used to attend the conference about 2 years ago with Durmuş when it was held in Kherson. It was a very good organizations, and again, this is, even though this is online and virtual organization, virtual conference, it is very, very well organized. So I would like to thank you for organizers. I would like to start with the definition of virtual worlds. Virtual worlds is a computer-generated simulated environment. It's designed to allow users to navigate and interact with each other, with objects and each other's within the virtual environments. Many virtual worlds are designed with multiple users. That's we call this kind of virtual environment as 3D MUVE, multi-user virtual environments. So this is the 3D MUVE. I mean that the multi-user virtual environments is appropriate for situated immersive learning, and also it represents users with avatars. Avatars means it's a 3D representation of users, and it could be a picture icons, or also it's a kind of graphic design of 3D representation of users, kind of like humanoid icons of the users. It resembles with real world with certain rules. The users' ability to roam within the virtual environment, or also they can feel the distance and gravity. So this is the screenshot of Second Life as a virtual environment. As you see, those are the screenshot of educational institutions. That's our research we conducted to get appearance of educational foreign language teachers. So those are the screenshot of virtual multi-user virtual environments. So to get an idea about what kind of environment is it. So this is another example. This is a this screenshot got from the Second Life virtual environment, virtual world, in other words. This is a language class screenshot. As you see, the avatars sitting on their chairs with the table, and also there is a board in front of them. Then the teachers are teaching them a foreign language. So The features of virtual multi-user virtual worlds are those environments allows learners to have a strong sense of being there because of the 3D features, and also users can interact with each other through the pseudo physical contact, and also it resembles the real world situations, and also simulations of physical movements within the learning environments. It has the kind of feel that you could feel that you are like in the real classroom with your avatar, and then also users can position itself and objects within the virtual spaces. So you can also interact with the virtual objects, and then you could move to other spaces or other places, and also you can create your own 3D objects and put in the virtual space, and also you could also buy and sell 3D objects within the environment. So 3D virtual multi-user virtual environments and foreign language teaching. These environments has simulations of scenarios, and also it's a real-time immersive interaction between both students and instructors, and also there are the interaction between these 3D spaces. So their users and students can role play in language learning environment with the cultural context and clues, and also students can access virtual contexts, interact with digital artifacts, and represent them through the avatars, and communicate with other learners with computer-based agents, and also these environments enact collaborative learning activities in various types. So there are similar applications and projects using virtual worlds, multi-user. For example, Riversity from Harvard University. It's a virtual world called Riversity for health science issues, and this is a specific virtual world to teach to deal with health science issues. Another example was Quest Atlantis, developed by Indiana University. It's a NSF, National Science Foundation projects. These virtual environments deal with mostly ecological issues and characteristics of different habitats and causes of problems in them. So you can access the Riversity now. It's online, but the Quest Atlantis has gone because it was a project, and then after funding over, it has gone right now. So 3D multi-user virtual environments can encompass the use of a range of foreign language tools that supports learning theories such as experiential learning, street learning, and project-based learning. In our research, Second Life, in our case we used the Second Life to get foreign language teachers' opinions. I would like to give some more information about the Second Life. It's a server-based, user-built 3D simulated virtual world environments. It offers socially and culturally simulated interactions, not for only language learners, but also other learners who do not have opportunities to see different cultural contexts in real life. For example, there are some students that they don't have financial support to travel other countries that they are going to learn the language, but they can feel sense of being there in a virtual simulated learning environment in a certain country or certain language that they want to learn. So you could, maybe some of them among you has the account in Second Life. You could also create your own account. It's just free learning 3D space. Then you could teleport yourself to the university islands. Some of the biggest universities in the United States have their islands in Second Life. Some of them conduct their teaching and some learning activities in Second Life. This is a screenshot of the Second Life on the web browser. You could explore, discover, and create your own 3D objects and simulated world to work around. You could also download the application and then navigate through the 3D simulated virtual worlds. And in the Second Life, residents are avatars of the real people. If you see an avatar in Second Life, that means that it's a real people that walking around or roaming around in the space. And also, residents of the Second Life can buy and sell objects, 3D objects, or land within the Second Life. And also, they can build 3D objects, animate them, or sell them. It's a fully interactive learning environment. For language learnings, we use Second Life because it's immersive learning environment. There is no fear to make mistakes. Role are not specified, and also Second Life can be used as leisure time activity or after classroom activity. And also you could also assign some roles for students to interact with each other within their role, to practice their language, to the language that they are going to learn. The classes are mostly used for feedback and assessment because students can interact each other within the simulated environment. The teacher can listen them and then give feedback with their conversation and also assess them on their conversation. This is a link for a second language lab in Second Life. You could also visit this link. I will share this link after my presentation on the chat box, or also I could also upload my presentation and you could get these links to see the Second Life language learning environments. Let's start the purpose of our research. The purpose of our research was to investigate teachers' perceptions of the use of 3D simulated virtual worlds, Second Life specifically, and the factors that affect their willingness to integrate virtual worlds in their foreign language instruction. Those are the teachers who teach English language in Second Life. Specifically, participants of the research and their perceptions of world issues and viability of their current practices of Second Life were also examined in our research. We used qualitative research method for this descriptive study. We conducted semi-structured interviews with 15 questions. 3 expert reviews were received for the content and face validity from the United States. And participants of the study were English foreign language educators who have teaching experience in Second Life. And the contact information of the potential participants was collected from educators from Second Life blogs, social networks, and Second Life educators emailing list. 8 participants were responded positively to participate in our interviews. Those were 5 were female, and then 5 were male, and then 3 of the participants were female. The countries of the participants were United States of America, Turkey, United Kingdom, Japan, Greece, Poland, and Finland. We conducted our interview over Skype. Every interview took about 30 minutes. After the interview, also we allow participants to add their opinions about Second Life too. We used descriptive research to analyze the data and content analysis. In data analysis included 3 phases. The phase 1 was breakdown of the text. This includes coding materials, identifying themes, and finding patterns. The phase 2 was examination of the breakdown and explaining and examining the network. The final phase 3 was integration of examination. This includes explication of patterns and elaborating and refining the patterns to generalize the findings. Let's move on the findings. Based on the purpose of the study and the underlying research questions, teams were identified and networks were built from the participants' answers. These teams were categorized in three categories: current practices, perceptions, and finally viability. Current practices category includes purpose, current ownership of items or space in Second Life, and implementation in instructional context. Perceptions category surveys perceptions of Second Life as a 3D multi-user virtual environment and also teaching and learning tool. Viability category sheds insights, strengths, weaknesses, and challenges on using Second Life in educational context to teach English as a foreign language. In order to give more detailed information about the findings, I prepared two different graphics as a compact information to make a connections of findings easy. As you see on the graphic, multiple strengths and benefits of 3D multi-user environments pedagogy of Second Life. Participants used the Second Life for the purpose of professional development, career pursuit in teaching in English as a foreign language. As an ownership of Second Life, they used the Second Life as classroom management, stable meeting to generate teaching and learning experiences, and also preparation for students' self-access materials, posting students' own works. In the implementation part, Second Life, participants, I mean the English foreign language teachers, used Second Life as a authentic learning environment, joint learning places, and then text-based learning language practices. And also they used the Second Life for discussion purposes, field trips, role play purposes, and simulation purposes. What kind of educational activities they practiced in their Second Life? For example, workshops, they conducted conferences, YouTube videos, workup activities, slowdown activities, talks were used. And also the function they used frequently were local text and chat, because you could also chat and talk with the avatars within the Second Life environments. And also you could send instant messages. And also you could conduct the conferences, meetings, and you can buy also island or buildings and then conduct the workshops. And those are the functions that participants used. What was the positive educational activities the participants reported were collaboration, meetings with colleagues, and satisfaction and having fun in teaching and creating and building things. Their perceptions, there were positive components of perceptions toward Second Life as a 3D multi-user virtual environment. You could create, it is a creative and artistic, it has a creative and artistic components, situations similar to real life because of the 3D features, and also efficacy to talk, record, play, network, cultural diversity. You could also place the cultural clues and create cultural context for language learning. And also it is fun, especially for the first users. And you could also access different speakers from the different parts of the world. It could be cultural speakers from different cultural backgrounds, linguistic backgrounds, and also it provides authentic network and also cost effectiveness. You just have a computer and internet connection to do this kind of activities. In the second graphics, I combined the strengths and viability of Second Life as Move. Strengths of the Second Life, it provides authentic learning environment. It has face-to-face features over the distance with your avatar, feasibility for doing things impossible in real life because of the, for example, like you could interact with the native speakers in 3D simulated environments using voice and flying, listening, music, and then you could also create beautiful scenery within the environments. And also the other strength is meeting different people from different cultures, different part of the world, learning technology and language at the same time. You could, because using Second Life may require some technical skills too. Weaknesses of the Second Life were induction needed. You have to you need to have some certain ICT skills to use to operate Second Life, and also training needed to operate Second Life. Tutors needed at the beginning, especially for the novice users. You may face the technical problems because of the nature of 3D walls. It's a 3D graphics, and also it requires broadband connection. Otherwise, you may face slower internet connections and some sort of interruptions of your communication, especially voice interruptions. All challenges that teachers faced using the Second Life, some technical issues like hardware or internet connection issues. It's also hard to manage classroom within the Second Life because of the you just interact with the other avatars and other users as an avatar, and then using your voice and text. That's the problem sometimes. Difficulty of synchronous communication due to the time zone, because some it's open from all over the world. Some users joins other part of the world, and then there is a time zone problems. Even though there is a daytime here, the other part of the world, it's gonna be like in the middle of the night. And also training skills to operate Second Life and how to use it to attend classes in Second Life. So you need to have a training, or you need to train your teachers to how to operate Second Life, how to teleport yourself, and then how to create objects, how to move objects within the Second Life, or also how to put your presentation, how to put your video, and those are needs some sort of technical skills. And also cultural differences also another issues, because we are in the environment that multiple culture, diverse cultural background with the people with diverse cultural backgrounds. So we may face some intercultural interaction issues. So intercultural competencies are required for the teachers. The potential competence of Second Life is building 3D representations of learning objects. So you could create your animation, graphic, and learning objects. There is also cultural diversity, and also you could place cultural clues within the 3D environment for the language that you are going to teach. And positive and promising features, the advanced interface to extend the people with disabilities, especially it is very good environment for the people with disabilities. They could move their avatars all over the 3D environment without any limitation. That's a big advantage for the people with special needs. And also it's an environment that there is no cultural bias environment. It's a culturally and sexually non-biased safe place for education. It's also 3D space in education, 3D web version of education. It offers teacher training courses and materials, lesson plans for teachers within the.
Excuse me. You have once more 2 minutes because we have some requirements to necessary time. So you
All right.
welcome.
Okay, I'm almost done. This is the frequency of users, which features they used in Second Life. Let's move on to discussions. Second Life is a promising environment. In particular, it's a great potential as a 3D simulated world to provide new features for the foreign language teachers. And there are also some challenges because of including technical issues, classroom management issues, difficulty of synchronous communication, and also it needs broadband communication, high-speed internet connections. And also there is a lack of body language and other forms of feedback in Second Life. Teachers can use the Second Life environments as a teaching and learning tool. And they can communicate and interact with people from different cultures. Second Life provides authentic learning environments, joint learning places, and test-based language practices. So it is impossible to build in the real world with learners with different locations. So teachers also can talk, record, play their actions in the Second Life. There is also cultural rich environments that you could create with cultural clues. As I said before, there are also some technical issues and disadvantages of Second Life that I mentioned before, so I will move this one. So maybe it may cost renting place in Second Life and creating 3D objects. There's another issue. And so it's a student-centered learning environment, so authentic teaching environment that provide engaging and constructive learning environments. Limitations I mentioned before. Limitation of this study due to the practical constraints. The study was conducted among a fairly small groups of target audience, specifically English foreign language educators who are using Second Life as a teaching problem. The other limitation was it's a qualitative in-person interviews in constraints with educators responding to questions and sharing their experiences outside of their natural settings. So that's why this study was also limited by varying levels of the participants' articulation and abilities. So suggestions: there is a need to investigate which assessment tools can investigate and document successful teaching and learning in this interesting, promising environment. There is. The second one is there is also a need to work with educators as well as foreign language learners in Second Life to assist them in development of computer literacy and technical skills to utilize Second Life. Finally, there is a need to work with English language teachers to assist them with establishing community or feelings of connections for students in Second Life context. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for listening. If there is a questions, I may also have the questions.
Thank you very much for a very interesting report. And we have first question from David Esteban, which were, in their own words as well, the experiences of students. Isn't it Second Life a rather outdated platform for youngers, for example?
Yes, we can say some sort. We could say this because right now youngsters are more like they like to spend their more time in social networks instead of spending time with 3D learning environments such as Second Life or other virtual worlds, because it requires a very good internet connection and broadband connection. So and it requires a lot of data to consume, so they don't prefer this kind of environments to interact with each other. So that's why they prefer interacting with each other with using social networks such as Instagram, Facebook, and other social networks tools.
Thank you. Any other questions from our audience? If you have, you can turn your microphone and ask your question, or you can send it via chat or raise your hand. So I have also a question. What do you think, how this technology will impact on soft skills of learners in real life?
Well, Second Life or similar virtual worlds can provide opportunity for them to interact with each other. With you could create simulate a real worlds with that. It is maybe it is impossible to do in physical environments. So you could practice their learning with simulated environments with scenarios or case-based studies. For example, if you could also create a classroom for classroom management teacher, for example, teachers can practice their classroom management skills in this virtual environment before moving the real classroom. So we could use these kind of environments to do some, for example, some business school students create companies in the Second Life and then try to practice how to sell their product in the Second Life, then move on the real life. So we could use this kind of environments with this kind of purposes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe any other questions? If no, then thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
your
listening.
report, for your presentation, for your answers. And we will go to our third presentation in this section. So I would like to continue. And in this case, we have our speaker, new speaker. Some seconds, excuse me. In this case, we have, yes, yes. Topic, conceptual aspects of interpreted training in the context of modern simulationist interpretation technologies, prepared by Rostislav Tarasenko, Svetlana Amelina, and Sergei Semerikov. Presenter is Svetlana Amelina. So please, you can start.
Yes, thank you. In our presentation, we will focus on technological competence as a component of the proto certification programs, content aspects, and means of information technology training of simultaneous interpreters. Researchers have recently been increasingly considering implementing changes to the training of simultaneous interpreters in order to bring it up to date with modern developments in information and communication technologies. In particular, Carl and Brown emphasize that availability of web or cloud-based video conferencing services, as well as access to them on tablets or other mobile devices, raises new questions about the feasibility of translation through these systems. PIM believes that university can diversify interpreter training programs by offering studies in specialized areas of translation, computer skills, familiarization with new technologies, and the like. Acknowledging the lack of systematic training materials on modern information technologies in simultaneous interpreting, Rutten, Eberhard, and Sound began work on developing support materials for interpreters on the use of RSI technology. Sanchez points out an increasing number of universities worldwide that offer advanced interpreted training curriculum. They take into account the needs of the translation market and the rapid development of new technologies. Given the above, implementing conceptual changes in interpreting training programs is becoming increasingly urgent. Our research is aimed at minimizing the gap between professional process and interpreters' readiness, improving the technical training of translators, acquiring skills in using latest simultaneous interpretation technologies, and updating the content of the educational program components. These aspects of the study are relevant because of the development of information technologies in interpretation, the need of interpreters for technology, the need of interpreters for more information, and possibilities of using open, reliable resources. Global trends are related to increasing the attention of clients to certified translation agencies and to certified interpreters. The growth in many countries of specific needs for certificated interpreters and expanding the offer of association and institutions to certify interpreters is a technological aspect. Certification of interpreters includes simultaneous interpreters is based on language, intercultural, research, technological, thematic, interpretation, ethical, and service delivery competencies. And especially technological competence includes knowledge of translation technologies, skills to translate by means of information and communication tools, and a wide range of information and communication technology skills. The information and technological competence of the simultaneous interpreter means, first of all, the ability to receive and process the signal with input speech, the ability to translate it into target language with subsequent implementation of the target online algorithm of the audio signal with translated speech of adequate quality, and skills in using the necessary set of information resources, software, organizational measures, and technical devices. Interpreters need new knowledge, skills, and abilities in targeted search for domain-specific texts on the internet resources, using electronic translation sources to create multilingual glossaries, structuring terminological material by means of office software, creating electronic glossaries, using specialized CAI modules to learn the terms, connecting to RSI networks, based remote simultaneous interpretation system, using interpreter desk of simultaneous interpretation system, and so on. And simultation of typical professional tasks of simultaneous interpreter in a laboratory environment using real state-of-the-art tools in the form of technical equipment and software should be the key to forming a high level of information and technologies competence. With this in mind, we have defined a list of basic requirements for such a laboratory. On the following slides, you can see this simulation of simultaneous interpretation process using different technologies: traditional, CAI, and RSI. So, in our view, the main ways and conditions to ensure the interpreter training using modern simultaneous interpretation technologies are differentiating the stages of learning information technologies in interpretation by level of difficulty, modernization of the selected academic courses content in terms of broadening the scope of knowledge and skills in the application of information and communication technologies, applying applying a way of unification, the study of similar operations that are common to different systems in translation and interpretation, and creating and using a specialized simultaneous interpretation laboratory that meets specific requirements for modern interpreters. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation, and we have time for questions. You can pose a question using chat, or you can turn your microphone or raise your hand. Maybe I will have first question. During your presentation, I can have possibility to compare technical part and personal participation of each translator. So my question is, what do you think, which percent of automatical part and what percent of personal efforts of simultaneous translator? What do you think?
I think it's 50-50. Both is so important for the successful process of interpretation.
Okay, so for all different technologies, only 50-50. So without technical part, can it possible to translate, or maybe what difference between fully automated or fully translated from person? What differences in time and resources?
I mean, the technologies and the tools, they don't run without work of interpreters, and so it will be not confrontation. It will be both. Are important, and it must be combined, the technological part, the technological equipment in RSI technology or CAI technology, and the work of interpreter. The question is, we can and we should to teach our students to use this this equipment and these technologies.
Okay, so in this context, you can propose, for example, what part of preparation for translator might be knowledge of modern information technologies in translation, and for example, what this proportion have to be established before his or her training. Okay, and okay, thank you for your answer. Maybe other questions? Okay, we have no questions from chat box. I didn't see hand of participants. Okay, so I have once more question to you. You told about different technologies of preparation for translator. Could you explain difference between them, and in which case would be better to use some of these technologies, or these technologies, for example, complete substitutes, or maybe they are complete some translator tasks?
Thank you for the question. It's interesting to compare these technologies. The differences are following. Traditional technology, we know, the traditional technology is interpreter desk in cabin, and so on a without visual and without glossaries support. As for CAI technology, this technology includes glossary support and possibility to use their internet resources, but not all glossaries are linked with internet, interpret bank, for example, and so on. And as for RSI technology, this technology is the latest, I would say, and it includes both audio, visual, and glossary support, and also support in the form of translated fragments, so of the speech.
Okay, thank you. So what do you think about perspective of development of these technologies? Some personal effort will be necessary, or this process will to be mostly computerized?
In the future, I think it will be mostly computerized, but without interpreter, it's impossible to use this technology as instead of interpreter. In the next future, maybe in the next 100 years will be the new technologies, and we'll see.
Thank you for your forecasting. And if something from our audience have a question, you're welcome. We have time for one more question. If no, then thank you very much for your answers. Thank you very much, all participants, for active participation, for your questions. And thanks a lot for your presentations. So in this moment, we close this session. Thanks a lot, and see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to the organizers of this wonderful conference. It was really brilliant organization.
Many
Thank you so
thanks
much.
for your opinion, and many thanks for your research. Thanks a lot. We are glad to see you again and again on our conference.
Welcome.
Bye.
Many
Bye.
thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.